You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of this shit. Money swollen like sis. They done perfected the kid. Got a billion who sank on my head. Nothing better. Pull out the rope I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil, that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 11th part of What If Deku Meets Powerpuff Girls. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of ChiWriters on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Back with Izuku and Buttercup vs. All Might. The air buzzed with tension, the ground rumbling slightly as Izuku coughed, clutching his stomach after finally getting back to his feet. His head swirled, but he shook off the dizziness to take in the chaotic scene unfolding before him. Buttercup unleashed a flurry of green energy blasts at All Might, each one crackling with vibrant power. Beams shot through the air, expanding into bolts of energy that lit up the surroundings. Despite being caught off guard for a moment, All Might dodged with ease, slipping past the blasts with a graceful agility that belied his size. Nice try. But you'll have to do better than that, he taunted, a glint of amusement in his eyes. But Buttercup smirked, gladly. With incredible speed, she dashed forward, her fists clenched. Where did she chug? She launched a surprise punch squarely at All Might's jaw, the impact sent him stumbling back with a grunt. Izuku watched in worry, his heart racing. That's not going to work, she can't beat him, he thought, anxiety gnawing at him as he observed the fight. All Might's smile faltered as he rubbed his chin, a flicker of respect crossing his face. Seems like that girl can really punch, can't play around now, he mused, momentarily distracted. Just then, Buttercup launched herself into the air, winding up for another attack. But All Might wasn't about to let her get the upper hand again. He sidestepped her flying punch with impeccable timing and, before she realized what had happened, he grabbed hold of one of her legs. With a swift motion, he tossed her against the wall of a nearby building, the force of the impact sending rubble cascading down around her. Guess you could say that hit really knocked the wall down, he quipped, chuckling at his own pun, though a hint of concern flickered in his eyes. As he spoke, Izuku felt a surge of determination. He couldn't just stand by. He had to help Buttercup. No. I won't let her fight alone, he thought, pushing through the worry. He charged at All Might, screaming, one for all. 7%. Rushing palm. The determination in his voice echoed through the space as he unleashed his attack. All Might crossed his arms over his chest, bracing for the impact. Izuku's palm struck him head-on, creating a rush of wind that swept through the area, pushing debris aside. Panting and nervous, Izuku jumped back, glancing at All Might, who laughed menacingly in his villain persona. Young man, do you think that flimsy attack was going to hurt me? With only a few feet away, Izuku took a defensive stance, but his face betrayed him, quivering in awe at All Might's formidable presence. Just as All Might strode closer, he heard Buttercup's voice ring out. Hey, Muscles, look out, she shouted, catching his attention. Before All Might could react, he noticed Buttercup slam against the wall beside him, a result of their earlier clash. Suddenly, a large section of the wall began to crumble and fall toward him. Instinctively, he raised his arms to shield himself, managing to catch the massive concrete chunk just before it could crush him. Even with his incredible strength, he strained slightly under the weight of the 3-ton slab above his head. You're not bad. Trying to use this to slow me down, he grunted. Buttercup stalked forward, her fist glowing with energy. Hey, I did warn you, Muscles, she quipped, a smirk on her face. All Might narrowed his eyes at her bravado, his fingers digging into the wall, cracking it. But before anything else could go down, Izuku sprang into action, activating 10% of one for all to carry her as he sprinted away. What the hell? Buttercup exclaimed, caught off guard by his sudden intervention. We have to regroup and find cover. Izuku insisted, not giving her a chance to argue as he speedily dashed around the corner, Buttercup in his arms, leaving All Might behind. All Might managed to free himself from the wall, tossing the broken pieces aside. He stood tall, still wearing his signature smile, though it now held a hint of annoyance at the unexpected hassle. Honestly, that girl is quite troublesome, striking and running away, he said. Young Midoriya is not performing as best as he should. His tone was a mix of setback and exasperation. But then his expression turned serious. Though her strength is impressive, he glanced at the wall he had tossed aside. All right, time to find them. With that, he rushed off in pursuit, the thrill of the challenge driving his every step. Having put some distance between themselves and All Might, Izuku found a hiding spot in a building and sighed in relief. He peeked around the corner and, seeing nothing, said, "Okay, the coast is clear. We can dis-OW." He was interrupted by a strong punch to his shoulder. Rubbing his arm, he looked up to see Buttercup glaring at him. "What the hell, was that, pal? We could have won back there," she exclaimed, frustration evident in her voice. Shoo! He tried to silence her by putting a hand over her mouth, but Buttercup grabbed his hand, giving him an icy glare. "I just saved you," Izuku insisted, his tone firm. "We couldn't defeat All Might. He would have broken through that wall any moment." Buttercup rolled her eyes. "Oh yeah, like he was so in a rush to push away that little present I left," she said, smirking. Izuku frowned, feeling peeved at her dismissive attitude. "Buttercup, all you were doing was annoying him. Your attacks were nothing to All Might." Buttercup narrowed her eyes. "So, that punch I gave him, it didn't make a difference, huh?" she shot back. "Look, Buttercup, I get that you want to fight, but do you even realize who we're up against? All Might isn't just some guy." Izuku exclaimed, exasperation creeping into his voice. "He's the symbol of peace. Every punch you threw was like throwing pebbles at a wall. He didn't even flinch." Buttercup rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed. "Oh please, he's not invincible. I hit him. I was just toying with him, trying to see what he was made of." "Toying with him?" he asks in disbelief. "Buttercup, he's literally the strongest hero there is. You might think you're tough, but you can't underestimate him like that. If you keep acting reckless, we're going to fail." Buttercup, irate, opened her mouth to shoot back at Izuku, but then a rumble echoed through the air, cutting her off. Izuku shivered, instinctively sensing that something bad was about to happen. Just then, Buttercup's ears perked up. "Get out!" she yelled, grabbing Izuku and dashing to the other side of the room just as the wall beside them came crashing down. When the dust settled, All Might stood there, a towering figure of raw power. Well, I see you two decided to hide," he said, his tone condescending as he looked over the duo. "Clever, but time is running out. Do you want to give up?" His tone was more mocking than the least bit helpful. Buttercup, as always, was ready to fight, but glancing at Izuku, who seemed all the more hesitant, she decided on a different approach. Taking a moment to think of what Blossom would do, she spotted her answer and with a sly look, she said, "Thanks for the heads up, Muscles. We wouldn't want to cut it too close." Her left hand glowed green as an energy bolt began to form. "But I don't think we're choosing to give up, just yet." All Might chuckled, confidence radiating from him. "I will say that your attacks are impressive, but," he took a dismissive stance. "Not enough to handle me," he proclaimed. A smile crept onto her face. "Oh, yeah. Try this." Without warning, she shot the energy bolt into the roof above them, causing it to crumble. All Might froze, taken aback by the unexpected tactic. Izuku froze, about to yell a warning, "All Might, watch H," but instead let out a yelp as Buttercup pulled him by his collar and flew out the nearby window. "Now we fly," she shouted as the building crumbled behind them. They soared away from the scene, Buttercup holding Izuku tightly. She glanced ahead and laughed. "See, green bean. I told you, we're gonna win," she smiled as she looked forward, giving distance. Izuku didn't respond, he only looked back, wondering if All Might had been truly stopped. His answer came with a crashing sound from the demolished site. A blast erupted, sending an air gust that made him and Buttercup cough from the upturn. Dread filled his chest. Suddenly, they both heard something above them. When Izuku looked up, he saw the last person he wanted to see. As they landed down, a crash echoed between them and the distant gate, forcing them to stop in their tracks. A dust cloud appeared. Through the dust cloud, a silhouette emerged, a red glint flashing in his eye. "I am here," was the only indication they got before All Might bolted toward them. Buttercup reacted quickly, shoving Izuku to the side for safety just as All Might charged. He tumbled away with an "oomph," while Buttercup readied herself to confront their foe. She aimed a glowing punch, but All Might barely dodged the attack. "What the h-" she began, turning to attack again, but was abruptly slammed down by a palm to her face, the impact creating cracks in the ground beneath her. Izuku, still reeling from being tossed aside, quickly scrambled to his feet. "Buttercup, no," he screamed in panic, witnessing the overwhelming force of his mentor against his partner. Fear surged in his chest as he glanced around, searching for anything he could use to help her. All Might stood tall, laughing heartily as he held Buttercup up high, face in his large hand. "Well played, young lady, but what do you think you will do now?" His voice dripped with condescension, amusement evident at her apparent defeat. Buttercup held her ground, her body tense and her eyes blazing green behind his hands. "Now he did it," were her only thoughts before her next move. Back with Bakugou and Blossom versus Nizu. After smashing another robot into oblivion, Bakugou approached a door marked "Villain's Lair." He sneered, muttering, "This better not be some lame butt joke." Just then, Nizu's face flickered onto a nearby screen. "Ah, Bakugou. This is no joke," his tone was cheerful and mischievous. "The exam is within this room," he chirped, a teasing glint in his eyes. "Whatever." Bakugou growled, slamming the door open. He was ready for a showdown, but was met with a chilling emptiness, just a solitary TV flickering in the center of the room. "What the Nizu? Get out here and fight me," he shouted, irritation bubbling to the surface. The screen crackled, revealing Nizu, who was laughing maniacally, a cup of tea shaking in his paw. The sound sent an unsettling chill down Bakugou's spine. "Oh, Bakugou. Welcome to my trap," Nizu declared, pressing a button that slammed the doors shut behind him, a steel barrier sealing the exit. "What the hell?" Bakugou growled, unleashing explosions from his palms. "I thought I was gonna fight you." Nizu chuckled a bit more, before he slowly regained his composure. "Oh, Bakugou, I never said you would confront me directly, only that a confrontation was in store." His laughter echoed, fueling Bakugou's growing rage. Bakugou's eyes widened in disbelief before narrowing with fury. "What kind of sick game is this?" "Dear Bakugou, as a villain for today, I must remind you, we can't always be truthful. That was your first mistake. But perhaps your biggest mistake was splitting up when it was clearly stated this was a match done in pairs." Nizu smirked, reveling in Bakugou's frustration. Clenching his fists, "F this. This was a waste of my time. I'm leaving." Bakugou turned to unleash another explosion at the door. But as the smoke cleared, he realized the door remained intact. Confusion and anger twisted in his gut. He turned back to Nizu, a sneer plastered on his face. "What's going on?" Nizu simply smiled, his eyes glinting with mischief. Blossom flew into a large room, her heart pounding as she spotted over dozen three-pointer robots and a room leading to more coming in. Their scanners locked onto her. She flinched but quickly noticed behind a clear glass wall, a massive bomb was placed at the center, its shape eerily reminiscent of the decoy bomb from the battle trials. "Help! Help me!" A muffled voice cried out, sending her heart racing as she understood that Iz was the captive, tied to the bomb, but didn't know who, as their face was hidden beneath a sack. "Hang on. I'll be right there," she yelled, determination surging through her. But before she could charge in, the three-pointer robots launched missiles at her. "No," she yelped, narrowly dodging and stumbling out of the room. Regaining her footing, she peeked back inside. The robots raised their weapons, ready to attack. Just then, Nizu's voice echoed through the room, rich with mirth. "Congratulations, Blossom, for making it to my captive. But too bad you'll be too busy to save them." "What do you mean?" she shouted, confusion etched across her face. Nizu pressed a button, and a screen flickered to life, displaying Bakugou in another room, unleashing explosion after explosion without success. Blossom gasped, eyes wide as she struggled to comprehend the situation. "Greetings, kids." Nizu's voice boomed over the speakers, cutting through the chaos of Bakugou's attempts. "Although I'm a villain today, I'm still your principal. Each of you is in a trap set up by me. This test was about working together, but you both missed the mark. We can remedy that." Blossom's heart sank as she processed his words. "You see, Bakugou is trapped in a room that can only be opened with 2 keys, one of which you each possess. You have 10 minutes to save your friend and complete the exam, or risk the life of your captive." "What? What do you mean?" Blossom exclaimed, realization crashing over her. "And how do I find and save him?" Nizu continued, his voice calm and almost gleeful. "The door trapping Bakugou can only be opened by each of you placing your keys in the keyholes on either side of it and turning them at the same time. But here's the catch, the facility is designed like a maze, and navigating your way back to each other will be quite the challenge. To assist you, I've gifted you each with a tracker, earlier as well. Whoever activates it will give away their location, sending a signal that allows the other, capable one, to track them. But there's more at stake. The bombs are also linked to the keys. You'll need to insert both keys to deactivate them before the timer goes off. Quite frankly, you will need the other in order to save the day and complete the exam." Blossom sighed in relief. "Alright, there is still plenty of time, and if I really hurry, we could pass this exam. Okay, we can do this. We just have to find each other, and then we can save him." She was ready to shout her plan to him, but "I don't need help," he loudly proclaimed, no room to argue or waver. Silence filled the room, thick with tension. Nizu hummed in amusement. "Are you serious, Bakugou? I'm not weak enough to need anyone's help." Bakugou shot back, defiance radiating from him. "You can't be serious," she said in disbelief. "You can't seriously prioritize your pride over saving someone's life. What's wrong with you?" Blossom's anger flared. "This is a team exam, and like it or not, we have to work together to at least save the captive. So, please, Bakugou, just send out the tracker and I can dash." Bakugou's indifferent voice burst out, cutting her off. "I already have told you that I don't need your help. I'll find a way out and save your butt instead." To prove his point, he unleashed blast after blast of his quirk, each doing little at a time. And with that, the video cut off, leaving Blossom, dumbstruck. "Why you dash?" Blossom's hair began to swirl around her, her eyes glowing pink as her emotions took over. Just then, a missile was launched toward her. Instinctively, she raised her hands, and the missile halted mid-air, enveloped in a vibrant pink glow. With a fierce look, she turned her attention to the robots. "Stand down, target," they commanded, their mechanical voices echoing ominously. Blossom scowled, and wasting no time, hurled the missile back at the offending robot, and it exploded in a shower of sparks, leaving nothing but debris. The bomb remained unharmed, but time was slipping away. Without a second thought, she lunged at the remaining robots, unleashing a series of psychic strikes that sent 2 of them crashing to the ground. As she darted between them, she unleashed her freeze breath, encasing one robot in a thick layer of ice, rendering it immobile. Nizu watched the scene unfold with a detailed look. "Oh, this is going to be quite the show," he muttered to himself, as he sat back and watched the whole thing unfold. Izuku's mind raced, a torrent of helplessness and indecision flooding his thoughts. He watched in horror as his friend was held off the ground, presumably unconscious. "What do I do? I can't just stand here. But should I fight? Could I really hurt All Might?" He glanced anxiously at Buttercup, then back at All Might, and finally to the distant gate, desperately searching for a plan or even a way to move his shaking legs. What if I ran? Or could I go all out? But what happens to her? But this is All Might, he's on a whole different level. What if I mess everything up? What if the sound shook him out of his thoughts. Right, Midoriya. As you can see, it is time to end this game. Your teammate seems to be doing just that, he boasted, still holding Buttercup securely by her face. Izuku suddenly flinched, but not at All Might's words, but as he witnessed Buttercup, who he thought was unconscious, slowly moving her arms to reach for All Might's enormous fingers. Gripping them tightly, she surprised everyone, including All Might. "Well, young Kayama, I see you still have some fighting spirit in you," he chuckled momentarily, before continue, "can't fault a hero for that. But I'm afraid to say that the battle is over. All Might gave a loud, unexpected yell in pain. Izuku, startled by the noise, could not believe why. It was at that moment that he saw Buttercup, still in All Might's grasp, but had captured both the man's thumb and pinky, and like it was no problem, bent them to an unnatural direction. On reflex, All Might pulled his hand away from her face, nursing his injured fingers. Buttercup landed to her feet. "You messed with the wrong hero, Muscles," turning her fierce gaze toward All Might. Her eyes glowed intensely and everything changed from there. All Might, still nursing his fingers, muttered to himself, "Ouch, that actually hurt." He then turned back to where he had dropped his opponent but found her gone. Izuku blinked, confused and worried about where she had gone. Now confused, All Might wondered, now where did she go? A sucker punch to the face stopped whatever he was about to say, as he grunted in pain. He staggered back, his smile still there but eyes filled with disbelief, as he turned to see Buttercup glaring at him. In an instant, he was caught up in a whirlwind of close-quarter attacks, as she unloaded a flurry of punches and kicks that came at him without warning. Each strike landed with growing intensity and power. Buttercup delivered uppercuts, followed by a couple of hook punches that connected with his jaw, sending him reeling. A swift kick to the chest made him gasp as he struggled to defend himself. This can't be happening. All Might thought, panic rising within him. I'm getting overwhelmed by a kid. And she doesn't have one for all. He managed to regain his footing, blocking a few punches, but it was clear he was struggling. Bruises began to slowly show on his skin, his hero suit tearing from the strikes, and his hair fell disheveled, a stark contrast to his usual polished appearance. As he fought to sidestep and seize the opportunity to lunge and pin the student down, misfortune struck, she slipped past him effortlessly. In a heartbeat that felt like slow motion, Izuku's eyes shot wide in alarm as he finally moved, desperate to intervene, but All Might was too off balance to react. Buttercup skidded to his left, dodging his grasp with ease, and wound up for a right hook. With a feral expression, she cocked back her arm and landed a heavy blow to the hero's side. Gah! All Might gritted his teeth as pain shot through him, his knees buckled under the feeling. He slowly fell to the ground, clutching his side, trying and failing to cover up the severity of the hit, where a familiar ache throbbed menacingly. Just as he managed to get his breathing under control, a clinking sound was heard and he looked down to see a familiar pair of cuffs placed on the arm that was placed on the ground. And then an announcement echoed through the area, "Team, Izuku and Buttercup have passed the exam via capture." Hearing that, Buttercup's eyes returned to normal, her fierce expression softening. She paused before bursting into cheers, hoo-hoo, cheering and jumping up and down in victory. "Oh yeah! We did it, green bean, she yelled, running around in her typical exuberant fashion. But Izuku wasn't celebrating. He hurried over to All Might, concern etched on his face. Are you okay? Are you alright? He asked in a hushed but nervous tone. All Might didn't answer immediately, gathering his composure before he turned to stare at Izuku with a serious expression. Did you tell her about my weakness? His voice was strained, filled with urgency. Izuku's heart dropped. No. I swear, I didn't tell her anything, he stammered, trying to defend himself. I would never reveal your secret or your weaknesses. All Might seemed to relax slightly, but the seriousness remained. All right, he said, taking a deep breath. Just be careful next time. Rising slowly, All Might composed himself well enough to announce, congratulations to both of you competitors. That was a definite plus ultra match, and you performed admirably. He extended his hand, the one not clutching his side, for a shake. Izuku hesitated, guilt gnawing at him as he reached out, shaking All Might's hand. Buttercup stepped forward. Her spirit still soaring. No problem, Muscles. That was one heck of a match, she exclaimed cheerfully, shaking his hand before letting go. All Might merely grunted in agreement, the hint of a smile breaking through his pain. Well, it's best that I must go. But I hope you both visit Recovery Girl's office for a checkup. Until next time. With that, he bolted away, despite the pain. Yeah. We totally crushed it, she replied, her energy infectious. Let's go celebrate. We deserve dash. What were you thinking, Buttercup? Izuku's frustration boiled over, and before he could stop himself, he shouted, you shouldn't have hurt All Might like that. Buttercup halted mid-cheer, taken aback. Ah, what the heck? You fought him. That was a bad idea. Izuku continued, his voice rising. We should have come up with a plan to escape instead of charging in headfirst like that. Buttercup crossed her arms, growing irritation flashing in her eyes. What's your problem, pal? All this time, you've been so worried about All Might and his title, that you barely lifted a finger and let me bail you out. Twice. I wanted us plan an escape. I was protecting you from the dangers. Izuku shot back, urgency creeping into his tone. Especially when you wanted to take down All Might. That's insane. We did, or rather, I did take him down and passed. Buttercup scoffed, a smirk playing on her lips. Why are you so hurt about that? Did you not see the injury you gave him? He felt the same pang of guilt in his throat. That side was already dash. What do you mean, already? Buttercup's brow furrowed, eyes narrowing. Did he have an injury before this whole battle? Izuku clamped his mouth shut, panic rushing in. And no, I mean. I'm just saying that was a stupid and reckless move. You could have gotten hurt. Hearing that, Buttercup clenched her fists, fury sparking in her gaze. Stupid? Stupid? Oh, I see. If your dear friend Kaken did something similar, he'd be praised, but if I do it, it's stupid, huh? No. Kaken would never battle All Might head-on without a plan. He might be impulsive but he potential to be a great hero. Izuku insisted, frustration at the change of subject. Buttercup laughed dryly, her tone loud and mocking. Oh yeah, Mr. Die, is such a level-headed guy, rolling her eyes. Face it, Izuku. Your so-called friend is a menace, and he would have stepped up to Muscles, as well. His name is All Might. Show some respect, Buttercup. Izuku snapped, frustration boiling over. But she ignored him. If Captain Muscles fought you and Boom Boom Baby instead of me, I guarantee you'd be in a full-body cast for a week, because of his temper. In a matter-of-fact tone. Izuku's turn to scoff. You're one to talk, Buttercup. You have the same temper as him, and yet he has friends. The moment the words left his mouth, Izuku clamped a hand over his mouth, shock flooding him. Buttercup's expression shifted, vulnerability flickering in her eyes before it vanished, replaced by simmering anger. "Oh yeah? And no, please, be Buttercup," he stammered, desperate to fix it. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean dash. Can it, Izuku," she yelled, her voice cutting through the tension. "Wow, ha, ha," she laughed bitterly to herself and Izuku felt a growing knot in his stomach. "You compared me to Boom Boom Baby? The very same person who lunged at you during the quirk appreciation test," she raised a finger. "The same guy who almost scorched your freckled behind in the battle trial," another finger. "The same guy who puts you down and calls you insulting things like Deku, but you're still fooling yourself that he's your friend," she yelled at the guy. Her eyes glowed with anger, disbelief, and something akin to hurt. Izuku trembled, shock coursing through him as he kicked himself mentally for what he'd said. "Be Buttercup, I didn't mean dash." "Save it," she interrupted, turning away. But Izuku wasn't done. "Wait. I am Dash." Buttercup turned back to him, hurt in her gaze. "For the record, Deku." That made him instantly recoil, like he was slapped. "The difference between me and your so-called friend is that, unlike him, I actually care about you and treat you like a person, not some piece of SHT." She took a breath, visibly calming herself. "But I guess you'd rather have people around you, who treats you like SHT and tears you down, than people who actually care about you, huh?" Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away, keeping her emotions in check. Izuku stood frozen, his heart racing. What did I just say? Guilt flooded him as he watched her retreating figure, each step twisting the knife in his chest. Facing the gate where his teammate had just left, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just lost one of the few friends he has, or rather, had. Nizu's viewing room. In a room reminiscent of the main monitoring facility, Nizu sat comfortably with a cup of tea in paw, sharing the space with a shivering individual. "I do apologize for you being caught in my student's crossfire," he chuckled, choosing his words carefully. "Figuratively speaking, of course, but I guess it was rather cold of me." He offered his guest another cup of tea to help warm him up. They took the tea. "It's no problem, Principal Nizu." "It wasn't that bad," the boy replied, his voice shivering slightly. He took a sip and sighed contentedly, feeling the warmth seep in. "Anyway, I hope you'll consider the student's performance. I couldn't really see through the bag, but I heard a lot of commotion. She took down the robots by herself and managed to free me," he added with a chuckle. "Though I know she didn't really use the keys, just her ice breath." He shivered again, a reminder of his recent ordeal. Nizu smiled thoughtfully. "I understand where you're coming from, but I can't make a decision until all the teachers come together to grade. Still, I was quite proud of her tactfulness and ingenuity." He paused, his tone becoming more serious. "However, the other's performance will require more deliberation." Mirio nodded in agreement. "That seems fair," he said, finishing his tea in one big gulp. He stood up, brushing himself off. "Well, I best be going. You know how Sir Night-Eye gets when I don't report in," he stated with a grin. "Indeed," he subtly drawled. "Thank you again, Mr. Togata. I appreciate your participation in my little test." Mirio waved a dismissive hand. "It's no problem. What kind of senior would I be if I didn't help my juniors grow? Anyway, see you later." With that, he left the room. Nizu sat for a moment, reflecting on the day's events. He couldn't hide the delight he felt. "Ha. I do hope I'll have more moments like this in the future," he mused to himself, finishing his cup. He rose and made his way out, ready to join his students on the bus. As he stepped outside, he couldn't shake the feeling that the ride would be quiet, but expected. It was the weekend, marking the end of a demanding week of exams, and the day after the practical assessments had taken place. UA High School, once alive and bustling with youthful energy, now stood silent and empty. The echoes of laughter and spirited debates faded into a hollow stillness, as if the very walls of the school were exhaling a sigh of relief. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air, but the vibrant atmosphere was noticeably absent. The absence of students left a strange void, amplifying the sense of solitude that hung over the campus. Lockers stood closed. Classrooms lay untouched, and the cafeteria was devoid of chatter. While many of the students were happily at home, indulging in well-deserved rest after the week's intense written and practical exams, the teachers remained tied to their responsibilities. With their minds still swirling from the challenges faced during the assessments, most of the educators at UA found themselves grappling with paperwork, assignments to grade, and evaluations to prepare before Monday's return. In a certain office, this was precisely what was happening. A gathering of teachers who had participated in the Class 1A exams convened, their expressions serious as they shared their final thoughts and remarks about the students they had just evaluated. After reviewing the videos and talking amongst themselves, the air was thick with a mix of pride and concern, each educator weighing the potential of their young heroes. I must say, 13 broke the contemplative silence, pride evident in her voice. This year's students are quite formidable, she remarked, her tone tinged with admiration. I'd even go so far as to say they're quite unpredictable. Grr indeed, Hound Dog growled softly, his eyes glinting with approval. I was impressed by the level of teamwork they showed. But they still have a long way to go, he added. Aizawa leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression impassive. I don't disagree that most of the students performed above average in the exams, he said dismissively. But we can't ignore those who didn't meet the criteria this semester. His words hung in the air, laced with obvious disappointment. Yeah, I see what you mean, Present Mike nodded, mirroring Aizawa's sentiment. From all the little listeners, there were definitely some mixed results, he added. And that's exactly why we're having this meeting, Nizu interjected, clapping his paws together. To give our input not just on the written tests, but on the practicals as well. His tone shifted from serious to cheerful, cutting through the tension. So, are we all in agreement with the results? No objections to the students' outcomes? He scanned the room, looking for any sign of dissent. A quiet consensus settled over the room. No one voiced objections, though subtle glances between the teachers revealed unspoken disagreements. Very well then, Nizu continued, his expression calm and composed. I believe that concludes our meeting. Please return to your tasks, and make sure any outstanding paperwork is completed before Monday. I wish you all a restful remainder of the weekend. With that, most of the teachers stood, exchanging quiet nods and murmurs of agreement as they left. Only two remained, Recovery Girl and Midnight. Aizawa lingered for a moment, casting a final glance at the three individuals still in the room before deciding to depart as well. As the door clicked shut behind him, a heavy silence settled, broken only by the faint echo of footsteps fading down the hallway until they disappeared completely. After a brief pause, Nizu spoke again. Now then, I believe we have some matters to discuss specifically regarding three particular students, he began, a hint of seriousness creeping into his usually cheerful demeanor. The room grew still, the remaining teachers now focused intently on him. Midnight leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with a thoughtful smile. I have to say, it was a bit shocking to see the girls' powers in action during the final exam. They still keep surprising me, she remarked, her voice tinged with pride. Recovery Girl, sitting nearby, sighed, her brow furrowed with a mix of exasperation and concern. If I had known they were capable of that much damage, I might have insisted on a more thorough medical evaluation beforehand, she replied, shaking her head slightly. It's oddly concerning to be both shocked and not shocked at the same time, especially seeing that hot-headed one take down All Might of all people. Nizu nodded, absorbing their words with a serious expression. Yes, I could see that incident raised quite a few eyebrows. All Might has always been considered the pinnacle of strength in our world. To see him bested by a 14-year-old girl is noteworthy, to say the least. He paused, his brow furrowing in thought. Recovery, what can you tell us about All Might's condition after the match? Recovery Girl adjusted her visor, her expression shifting to one of professionalism. The damage he sustained isn't severe, but it was definitely significant, being it was a surprise attack and all. The girl managed to strike at his weak spot quite hard, I might add. She leaned forward slightly, her tone firm. Though the only real damage he sustained was to his pride, a bit. I can imagine, Midnight said, leaning forward with interest. So, throughout this whole exam, we've clearly seen that these girls, each, possess not just extraordinary abilities but also the potential to rival the strongest hero in our world. This type of information could be good or bad, depending on how it goes, she concluded, a tinge of warning under it. And I highly doubt that these three do not grasp the potentiality of their powers, Nizu added, leaning back slightly as he considered the implications. They've shown remarkable skill, and it's clear they're aware of the weight their abilities carry. Recovery Girl nodded, her expression thoughtful. That makes sense. They've demonstrated a level of maturity in their use of those powers, even, she gave a questioning glance at the animal, if their origins remain unclear. Indeed, Nizu trailed off as he glanced at her, understanding the intent behind her words. As I have already informed you, Chio, the conversation that Midnight and I had with the girls was all they were willing to share. I can't divulge much about their origins. They've kept certain aspects of their lives private, and I respect that. Clearly, there are things they are not open to discussing. His tone was firm yet understanding. Recovery Girl hummed thoughtfully, considering his words before turning to Midnight. Is that the same for you? You're their guardian now, right? Do you know much about their upbringing? Midnight pursed her lips. Honestly, I don't know much about their past either. While I'm their guardian for now, I've made it a point not to overstep the boundaries I set with the girls. Don't you think you're taking the role as a temporary parent too far? She asked in a serious and concerned tone. Midnight stared at her, taken aback. What do you mean? Dearie, Recovery Girl replied with a hint of seriousness, I know it seems nice to be one right now but, she said a little softly, just remember that it might not last too long if the currents change. That made Midnight fall silent, a slight sadness crossing her features, as the realization settled in. Recovery Girl then turned to Nizu. Have you talked with the other teachers about these girls' true origins? Nizu shook his head. No, I'd rather keep this knowledge limited to a select few. Pray tell, why? Recovery Girl asked, genuinely curious. Nizu smirked slightly, leaning back in his chair. Given the nature of the girl's remarkable abilities and the possibility that we might still have a spy among us, I thought it best to keep this hidden for the time being. It's a precaution. Oh, Recovery Girl replied, letting out a mock evil chuckle. How come I know now? What's stopping either myself or Nemuri from being the spy and using this information to our advantage? We could all have our own hidden agendas. For one thing, I know you have really liked having an assistant to mold and carry out some of the cases that would otherwise have been too much of a bother. Nizu's smirk widened, when she saw the equal amusement in the youth hero's eyes. Oh, and I have every confidence in your integrity, Chio. Besides, if you were a spy, I'd expect you to be much more subtle about it. Recovery Girl raised an eyebrow, amused. You flatter me. But the truth is, Nizu continued, his tone becoming serious again, I trust those in this room. It's the outside world that concerns me more. Recovery Girl pointed out, the other teachers aren't fools. Just because the big guy chooses not to reveal the footage of the fight doesn't mean they won't start suspecting something about these girls sooner or later. She paused, her expression thoughtful. It's ridiculous that none of them have connected the dots from the entrance exam, the USJ incident, and the sports festival. She sighed. It's frustrating how, because of biases and prejudices, we miss things right in front of us. They might overlook the connections everyone else seems to be blind to. Nizu let out a hearty chuckle at Recovery Girl's words, a knowing glint in his eyes. He was reminded of the outcome of the sports festival. So many heroes, as he saw it, were blinded by their own biases, failing to recognize 3 strong potential candidates who could have interned under them. The thought brought a wry smile to his face. It's a shame how often people miss what's right in front of them, he mused inwardly. While it was beneficial for the girls that their capabilities remained unnoticed, a sense of unease crept over him. What were others planning in the shadows? Particularly those who might not have the girls' best interests at heart. The thought sent a shudder through him as he pondered the possible implications. As he continued to reflect, Nizu's attention was momentarily distracted by something on his desk. His frown returned briefly, but he quickly masked it with his usual poker smile. Shifting his focus back to the 2 women before him, he spoke up. "Let's put this discussion on hold for now," he said vaguely, his tone suggesting a longing to move on. The women exchanged curious glances but sensed his wish to leave the matter unresolved for the time being. As he continued to sift through his thoughts, Nizu heard a faint sound from outside that interrupted his focus. His frown returned briefly, but he quickly adjusted his expression, slipping back into his usual demeanor. "I believe we have company," he said, his tone conveying that it was time for a short break. His words, though casual, implied more than he let on. Aizawa leaned against the wall just outside the meeting room, his mind swirling with the implications of Nizu and Recovery Girl's conversation. He had always been keenly aware of the nuances in conversations, and the weight of what might have been shared inside made him uneasy. What could they be discussing that warranted such secrecy? As he began to form a plan to confront them, the door swung open, and Midnight stepped out, her expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, arching an eyebrow, clearly probing for his reasons for eavesdropping. Aizawa felt a flicker of annoyance at being caught but quickly composed himself, pushing his hair back and adopting his usual nonchalant demeanor. "Just taking a break," he replied, trying to sound casual, as if that was a valid excuse. Midnight's knowing smile suggested she saw right through him. "If you really wanted a peek, you could have just asked," she teased, her voice taking on a playful, sultry tone that only added to his frustration. He narrowed his eyes, fully aware of her teasing nature. "I'll pass," he said curtly, turning to walk away rather than engage in her banter. "Suit yourself," she called after him, amusement evident in her voice. Aizawa felt the weight of the conversation linger in the air, but something compelled him to turn back. "Namiri," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Just so you know, some of the other teachers might not think much about those 3 girls." He took a breath, stepping into sensitive territory. "But I am, and Mike sees it too." She turned to face him fully, and he caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. "I hope you realize that whatever secret you and Nizu have won't stay hidden for long. There's something off about these students." He then sighed and leveled her a cautious look. "I get that you like playing the doting parent, but don't fool yourself into thinking," he didn't finish the thought. "I know that, Shota." Midnight's fist clenched slightly, her expression flashing with anger before it quickly passed. "But I understand I can't always choose the role I want. It has nothing to do with whatever you suspect." Her tone was firm, the protective edge in her voice unmistakable. Aizawa paused to absorb her words, surprised by the intensity of her response. Rather than push further, he simply said, "Very well, then," his voice measured. "See you on Monday, then." With that, he turned to leave, aware the conversation wasn't over. As the door closed behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to keep a close eye on the situation. The mystery surrounding the students was becoming increasingly complex, and he knew that secrets had a way of surfacing. Midnight didn't know what she felt, but she did know that some things were better left unsaid. Kamino, Yokohama. Kamino Ward, a sprawling neighborhood in Yokohama, was a hive of activity, where the pulse of urban life beat beneath the flickering glow of neon signs and the low hum of countless conversations. Amid the labyrinthine streets and towering buildings, there stood a nondescript bar, both a refuge and a front for the League of Villains' clandestine dealings. The dimly lit interior, bathed in warm hues, invited patrons into a world that felt almost cocoon-like, a temporary escape from the outside chaos. The wooden bar was lined with an impressive array of bottles, each holding concoctions both intoxicating and shrouded in mystery. Bar stools, their leather worn yet surprisingly comfortable, were neatly arranged along the counter, offering a place for regulars and newcomers alike to drown their sorrows or celebrate fleeting victories. In the week since the debacle in Hosu City, Tomura Shigaraki had retreated deeper into the shadows, his frustration simmering like a storm cloud on the verge of breaking. His grand plan to ignite chaos had faltered, overshadowed by the rise of Stain, the so-called hero killer. Every whispered conversation about Stain's newfound infamy twisted the knife deeper into Shigaraki's already fraying nerves. He longed to carve out a legacy of his own, one that would eclipse Stain's fame, but each day felt like a step further from that goal. Alone in his dimly lit room, he scratched at his dry, pale skin, the act of physical reflection of the turmoil gnawing at him from within. Tomura. The voice of Kurojiri sliced through the haze of his thoughts, a familiar call that felt both intrusive and necessary. Shigaraki blinked, momentarily disoriented before irritation surged through him. What, Kurojiri? Can't you see I'm dash? Forgive me, Mstr, Kurojiri interjected smoothly, his voice calm yet firm. But I must inform you that Jiren has arrived with new recruits and your associate is here as well. There was a brief pause, an unspoken caution hanging in the air as if Kurojiri anticipated an explosive reaction. Instead, Shigaraki's response was a curt, resigned, fine. Kurojiri took this as a signal to retreat, making his way back to the bar where the atmosphere was thick with tension. He was met with the same faces that he left behind, not so long ago. Jiren stood at the bar, an unremarkable figure yet one that commanded attention due to the sharpness of his demeanor. A middle-aged man of moderate height, he had a slight build, his eyebrows perpetually raised in a skeptical arch. His squinted pink eyes were often the first thing people noticed, alongside the small mustache and goatee that adorned his face. A gap where one of his front teeth used to be only added to his air of disarray. He would be best described a broker, a businessman well known in the underworld, knowledgeable about current trends and is also great at scouting potential villains. And so he was tasked with the dubious mission of gathering recruits for the League. Jiren had long since shed any pretense of moral obligation. His focus lay squarely on the bottom line, as long as he was compensated, the consequences of his actions were not his concern. Yet, what set him apart was his knack for acquiring information intelligence on potential recruits, their strengths, weaknesses, and quirks. Today, he had brought along two promising candidates. As they entered through the door, it was just then, the back door swung open, and an already annoyed-looking Tomura Shigaraki stepped in. His expression was a mask of irritation, the aura of annoyance radiating off him palpable enough to slice through the thick tension in the room. "What the hell do we have here?" he barked, pointing at the new faces that honestly would not have cared for. He saw a young fair-skinned girl, wearing a type of school uniform. She had inward-tilting yellow eyes with thin slit-like irises and a cheerful smile that showed off her pointed canines. Her smile may have appeared sweet, but her eyes held a sort of broken and psychotic tale. The other was a tall, pale young man with jet-black hair, styled into a crown that spiked upwards around his hair, hanging low over his eyes, which are thin, turquoise, and heavily lidded. His most striking features are undoubtedly the patches of gnarled, wrinkled, purple skin that cover much of his lower face and neck, all the way down past his collarbone, below his eyes, and on his arms, others, left to be known. He had a stoic, aloof persona that already pissed off Tomura. Not allowing himself to be deterred by the younger guy's attitude, Jiren began, "These are the recruits I mentioned." He gestured to the girl and the young man, trying to project confidence despite the weight of the unearthly being's gaze still lingering on him. "Recruits," he scoffed. "This pair of trash. I can already tell that these are the type of people that I don't want." Tomura said, unimpressed. "You brought me a BRT and a guy with no sense of the word, manners," he spat, glaring at the scarred man, who mutually did not like the guy as well. Now, Tamura Shigaraki, don't judge someone without getting to know them. Kurojire's voice was calm, trying to de-escalate the rising tension. They've come all this way, the least you can do is give them a chance. This broker is well known in the underworld and comes highly recommended. Right? Though I still get my finder's fee in cash, Jiren chuckled, feeling his ego rise, but I assure you, they do have potential. Saying that he pointed to the girl. She may look like a normal schoolgirl, but don't be fooled. She has been at the scene of numerous murders where the victims have bled out to death. Her name is Himiko Toga. Himiko Toga here. Toga piped up, her voice full of enthusiasm. I just want to live in a world where I can have fun and be accepted. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of innocence and madness. Like Stain. He's so cool. I want to meet Stainy, I want to be Stainy. Keep that up, and you might suffer the same fate that led to his downfall, Tamura replied dryly, barely registering the flash of madness in Toga's eyes. Jiren seized the moment to move on to the next recruit. And this one, he glanced at Dabi, who wore an expression of clear boredom. He hasn't committed any flashy crimes, but he has embraced the hero killer's ideals quite well. Ugh, do you guys even follow a cause? Dabi finally spoke. Do you really need new members that include this insane chick? He gestured dismissively at Toga. Whoa there, pal. Even the crazy little SHT over there, managed to spit out her name. You're a proper enough adult, how about you start with that, Tamura shot back. I go by Dabi, for now, he replied coolly. I don't want your alias, Tamura growled. I want your real name. Dabi chuckled dryly. Sorry, but I'll tell you when I need to. Besides, I'd rather unveil it when I meet a certain someone again. A glint appeared in his tired eyes. Arg, there's no need to flush your mouth about SHT, I never asked you. Tamura stood up from his seat, his body language seemingly threatening. I find you all, annoying, and with that. No, Shigaraki-Kurojire interjected. I deem you no good. Shigaraki ignored the man and charged forward, his palms stretched out to activate Z quirk. But the other two were already on the offense and ready to attack. But before either attack could hit, a couple of portals opened and redirected their attacks away from the intended targets. In the silence that followed, a sudden, eerie laughter cut through the tension. Everyone turned, startled by the presence of a familiar yet unsettling figure. Jiren's eyes locked onto the slender figure in the corner, sipping from a wine glass filled with deep red wine. The man's slow, deliberate sips had an almost ritualistic quality. His red and black ensemble, adorned with pink accents, seemed absurd on anyone else but only amplified the unsettling aura he radiated. But it was his eyes' deep, swirling green orbs that held Jiren captive. Toga shifted uneasily, her wide eyes kept on to the weird man. There was something deeply unsettling about him, an instinctual warning echoing in her mind. She could sense the danger he radiated, and though part of her was drawn to the possible sweet taste that was in his body, another part her, the one that won, felt a chill run down her spine. In contrast, Dabi was barely giving this guy the attention he sought, but subtly stretched out his hands at the ready smirk playing on his lips. What a loser, he muttered, his tone dripping with disdain. Yet even he couldn't fully dismiss the air of danger surrounding him. He steadied his hands, ready for anything. Tamura's irritation flared as he glared at Mr. X. What the hell are you doing here? His voice was low and threatening. Mr. X laughed, clearly unfazed. Just observing the entertainment, dear Shigaraki. Your little operation is quite fascinating. Tamura clenched his fists, the tension thickening. Stay out of my way, or I'll destroy you, he warned, his anger palpable. Jiren's curiosity piqued. Who exactly are you? He asked, trying to maintain composure. Him merely chuckled, finding everyone's reaction priceless, but it only made everyone else tenser. Oh, I do love making an entrance. I go by few names, but you can call me Mr. X. While I adore toying with expectations, I assure you I'm here on business, not malice. At least, not yet, he said with smile, that was anything but innocent. Mr. X stood up and took a leisurely step away from the bar, his laughter lingering like a shadow. You know, Shigaraki, I just had a rather interesting meeting with All for One, he said, his voice smooth as silk, dripping with what seemed to be mockery. Tamura's anger ignited at the mention of the name. What did he want with you? He demanded, his voice low and tense. The atmosphere thickened around them, as if the very air were suffocating under the weight of Mr. X's presence. Mr. X turned, a malevolent smile spreading across his face. Oh, just a little business arrangement. Nothing that concerns you yet. He paused, allowing the tension to build, enjoying the unease radiating from Tamura and the others. Can't risk ruining the surprise, well can't I? A heavy silence fell, a palpable pressure pressing down on everyone in the room. Tamura's fists clenched tighter, his frustration morphing into something darker. You think you can just waltz in here and play games with me? I won't stand for it. With a chuckle, Mr. X stepped back, a red mist beginning to swirl around him. You might want to keep a closer eye on your little operation. I have some associates coming to help and a special guest coming over to lend a healing hand, he said, the words dripping with an insidious charm. Tamura's eyes widened in fury, his anger boiling over. What do you mean by that? He growled, but Mr. X only smiled. What the F do you mean? In an instant, he began to dissolve into the crimson haze, laughter echoing as he disappeared. Remember, Shigaraki, the game is only just beginning. The room fell silent, everyone caught off guard by the sudden departure. Toga watched the dissipating smoke, her heart racing. I don't like him, she thought, unease knotting in her stomach. He's up to something. Tamura, unable to contain his frustration, slammed his open hand down on a nearby bar stool, disintegrating it ash. DMN it, he shouted, the remnants of the furniture crumbling to dust under his quirk. The chaotic energy in the room mirrored his anger, the remnants of Mr. X's presence lingering like an ominous shadow. Kurojiri watched the chaos unfold, his mind racing. I wonder what the MSTR discussed with that man. What did he mean about company, he pondered, as he went back to cleaning. Dabi, unfazed by the turmoil, pushed himself off the wall and shrugged, a smirk still lingering on his lips. This might be interesting after all, he muttered, turning away from the wreckage. He didn't care much for the theatrics, but the unpredictability of the situation had piqued his interest. I don't know what it is, but I know that this BSTRD is not to be trifled with. Jiren mused internally, caution flooding his thoughts. Tamura Shigaraki, who have you invited into your little party? UA. The weekend had come to an end, and a new day dawned at UA High School. Today was the day the class would learn about their overall performance in both the written test and the practical exam. For the Powerpuff Girls, each one dreaded the day for different reasons. Which is why they were not really making large steps to make it all the way there. Arg. Do we really have to come today? How about we call in sick and take our chances for later? Buttercup grumbled, clearly not looking forward to the announcement. Blossom raised an eyebrow at her sister's suggestion. Oh really? What are the chances of all three of us missing school, especially today, she replied sarcastically. Quite good, if you factor in that we're sisters and all of us are clearly not feeling up to it, Bubbles chimed in, trying to lighten the mood. Blossom sighed in exasperation, knowing all too well why each of them was apprehensive. Blossom, who felt confident about her performance in the written exam, couldn't shake her uncertainty regarding the practical part. She regretted not trying harder to decipher the clues throughout the exam, and a gnawing sense of failure lingered. She had destroyed all the robots and even managed to shut off the bomb without the key, but a voice in her head reminded her, I didn't follow the entire plan. Bubbles, usually the cheerful one, felt weighed down by guilt. The aftermath of her battle had left destruction in its wake, with ruined buildings and roads. What gnawed at her the most was the injury she unintentionally inflicted on her teammate, Jiru, leaving her in the nurse's office with bleeding ears. Bubbles knew it was an accident, but she despised hurting anyone, especially innocent people. I hope she's not too mad at me, she thought, anxiety churning in her stomach. As for Buttercup, she masked her unease with bravado, but inside, she was not in the mood to see a certain green-haired classmate. She had told her sisters about the exam from start to finish, detailing her argument with Izuku over their strategy. Neither Blossom nor Bubbles were surprised that she had wanted to fight All Might, while Izuku had urged caution. In the end, Buttercup had managed to bring the legendary hero to his knees, securing the HNDCFFS on him. But what stung the most was Izuku's comparison of her to Bakugou. It cut deeper than she expected, and although she didn't fully understand why, the thought lingered in her mind. Probably because I thought he was my friend or that he wasn't that much of a idiot. As the girls approached the school, a familiar voice called out, halting them in their tracks. Buttercup's heart sank, and she internally groaned at the sight of the last person she wanted to encounter this early in the day. Izukumidoriya stood by the entrance gates, looking more disheveled than usual. To say he looked fine would have been a complete lie. Dark circles formed under his eyes, beads of sweat gathered on his forehead, and he appeared more fidgety and guilt-stricken than ever. Over the weekend, Izuku had been relentless in his attempts to reach out to Buttercup, trying to apologize or at least talk things over. But she had ignored him, whether by putting him on mute during their calls or dodging his impromptu visits, which had happened twice that weekend. It was clear he wouldn't give up easily. Bubbles leaned over to Buttercup, a teasing smile playing on her lips. Looks like he doesn't give up easily, huh? Buttercup scoffed, crossing her arms defiantly. Yeah, unless it's a fight with his obvious idol, please. He practically tripped over himself to avoid taking me on in the exam. Her tone dripped with annoyance, masking the swirling emotions beneath the surface. Maybe he just feels bad about what happened, Blossom suggested gently, trying to be the voice of reason. You know, I'm sure he didn't mean to upset you. Buttercup shot her sister a glare. That's easy for you to say. He doesn't get to act like a total JRK, just because I didn't agree with him. Bubbles glanced between her sisters, sensing the tension in the air. You can't just ignore him forever, Buttercup. You'll have to talk it out eventually. Why? So he can compare me to Bakugou again? Buttercup snapped, frustration bubbling over. I don't need his apologies. I'm fine on my own. As the girls reached the school entrance, Buttercup's resolve faltered slightly as she caught sight of Izuku's anxious expression. He looked like he genuinely cared, but the thought of confronting him was like staring into a storm. Just then, Izuku took a step forward, his voice trembling slightly. As the words left Izuku's lips, they came out stammering and hesitant. Be Buttercup. Can we please talk? Buttercup's expression hardened, her resolve intact. No, Midoriya. I'm not interested. She turned away, dismissing him with a wave of her hand, but Izuku pressed on. I've been trying to reach you, he said, his voice tinged with desperation. I called, and I even tried to visit your house, but you weren't there. Buttercup shot him a glare. No, Midoriya, I was there. I just wasn't interested in talking to someone who doesn't consider me a friend. The words cut through the air like a knife, and Izuku flinched, hurt flickering in his eyes. But why you are my friend, Buttercup, he stammered, his sincerity evident. With a scowl still etched on her face, Buttercup replied, I don't think so, Green Bean. If I were really your friend, I wouldn't be compared to your freaking bully and insulted like that. But Kaken isn't. Izuku's heart sank further, and he attempted to explain. I didn't mean it like that. I just. But you didn't think before you spoke, Buttercup interrupted, her voice growing sharper. You think Kaken and I are the same? We're not. Of course you're not. You're both very special to me. Buttercup didn't understand how those words, for a short while, made her freeze. As he is my childhood friend. Buttercup could not stand it anymore. I just wanted you to know that dash. You know what, pal? I think you still don't get it. Maybe your other friends will enlighten you, but as for me, a green glow began to emanate from her, lifting her off the ground. I am late for class, she said, her tone lacking enthusiasm, clearly eager to escape the confrontation. Wait. Izuku shouted, panic creeping into his voice. What did I do wrong? Please, just wait. But Buttercup soared upwards, disappearing into the school building as someone inside opened a window for her. Down below, Izuku stood in disappointment, feeling the weight of confusion. He didn't understand why things had gone so wrong. He hated that he'd inadvertently insulted someone he considered a good friend, something he hadn't experienced much of in his childhood, apart from Kaken, and that friendship was complicated enough. Lost in his thoughts, he was startled when two familiar faces appeared before him. "Gh," he squeaked, eyes widening in surprise at the sight of Buttercup's sisters. They wore expressions that combined pity and annoyance, and Izuku couldn't blame them for feeling that way. "Hi," he managed to mutter, then hesitated. "Buttercup's still really mad, huh?" Bubbles rolled her eyes dramatically, faux anger written all over her face. "Duh, man." But then she softened, offering a reassuring smile that Izuku appreciated even if it didn't quite help. Blossom's demeanor was more stoic at first, but she eventually sighed. "Look, Izuku, Buttercup isn't totally mad for the reasons you think. It's just there's a constant with you and a certain someone." Her implication hung in the air, unspoken but understood. "She'll come around, but you need to really think about what you said and what you want from friendship." Izuku furrowed his brow, confusion clouding his thoughts. "What do you mean?" Blossom shook her head, her expression resolute. "I'm not really in the business of getting into my sister's business. Except when it hurts them." Bubbles interjected with a cough. Blossom groaned. "I mean, I'm not getting into my sister's personal lives unless it's really necessary." Izuku felt downtrodden, wanting to ask for help but unsure how. "Guys, we should get back before class starts," Bubbles said reluctantly. "Mr. Aizawa will be in a grumpier mood." Blossom nodded in agreement and looked at Izuku. "Come on, Izuku. Let's get to class." Silently, Izuku nodded and followed them through the school doors. The atmosphere of the classroom was mixed, upon arrival. Most were relaxing in relief knowing they passed the finals, although a certain number of them were slumped in depression. Both Mina and Kaminari were practically in tears as they whined to Shiro, although he was just as distraught as them too. "What are we supposed to do now? Everyone's going to have so much fun at summer camp." Mina sniffled. "This is so lame, how was it fair we had to go against the principal?" Kaminari whined as latched onto Shiro's shirt. "This is the worst." "Dude, I get it," Shiro groaned, still kicking himself over his exam pairing with Ida. "It didn't go well at all." "Shut up." Bakugou's booming voice cut through the chatter, startling everyone. He stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, his expression a mix of annoyance and defiance. "You losers need to quit whining. It's pathetic." Mina jumped, wiping her tears. "Bakugou, we're just..." "Just what?" "Crying like babies because you didn't get to fight a giant robot or whatever." Bakugou sneered, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "If you're going to mope, at least do it quietly. I might have given my A game, but I'm not going to sit here and wallow in self-pity." Kaminari shot back, "Yeah, but you're the only one who thinks you didn't fail." Bakugou rolled his eyes, scoffing. "I didn't fail. No way. I just underestimated the oversized fuzzball, that's all. Next time, I'll take him down for sure." His confidence was unwavering, even if the truth lingered in the air. Hearing that, Blossom just rolled her eyes, not wanting to get involved in the unnecessary drama that she knew Bakugou would inevitably bring. "Are you okay, Blossom?" Momo asked, her concern clear as she looked at her. Blossom turned her attention back to Momo and gave her a reassuring smile. "Oh, yes, I'm fine, Momo? Thank you for asking. Momo nodded, but her expression was still slightly worried. Okay, she said, though she knew differently. Ever since the whole group study session, Momo had come to appreciate the three girls more than she had at first. While she hadn't been as unfair as some of the others in class, she'd mostly kept to herself indifferent to others. But after spending more time with Blossom, Mina, and the others, she understood that they, too, were just keeping to themselves. The difference was, they had each other to lean on, whereas Momo had always felt a bit isolated. But not right now. So, I take it the practical exam was just as tricky for you and your partner as it was for me? Blossom asked, genuinely curious, but Momo seemed to blush heavily. Blossom's question seemed to catch Momo off guard. PP partner OH. Why yes, it was tough for us too, she stammered, a blush creeping up her cheeks. But Todoroki and I, we worked well enough. We found a way to distract Aizawa long enough to escape. Yes. Momo said quickly, her words stumbling out in her usual slightly flustered manner. Blossom, unsure of the other girl's reaction, figured it was probably just excitement or maybe her quirkiness. Either way, she didn't want to press. Alright, then, Blossom said with a light laugh, deciding to steer the conversation to a subject that was easier for her. At the back of the room, Bubbles was still busy apologizing, her voice full of sincerity as she spoke to Jairu. She had been feeling incredibly guilty about the way things went down during the practical exam, particularly with how her quirk had knocked Jairu unconscious. I'm really sorry, Jairu, Bubbles said, her hands clasped together in front of her as she lowered her gaze. I didn't mean to hurt you, it just happened so fast. I didn't mean to make my quirk that strong and dash, she was interrupted. Jairu, who had been sitting silently with her arms crossed, raised a hand to cut Bubbles off before she could keep going. Geez, girl, chill, she said, her voice light, though she let out a dramatic sigh. Yeah, it sucked, but honestly, I'm not really that mad anymore. Wait, really? Bubbles blinked, surprised by how forgiving Jairu was. You're not mad? Jairu waved her off, her usual cool demeanor in full force. I was mad that my ears were ringing and injured, but that's just part of the job, right? You don't go into battle expecting everything to be clean. I get it. But in the end, you helped us win and pass, so no big deal. Bubbles looked sheepish, feeling the weight of her earlier actions, but she couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. I'm still sorry about your ears, though, she said softly, her head tilting in regret. Jairu shrugged, unbothered. It's fine. You even got me and Cementos to the ward, and Recovery Girl worked her magic. No harm done. Bubbles nodded, a small thought flickering in her mind as she recalled the moment. It was actually Buttercup who helped too, but she thought to herself, not saying it aloud. It didn't feel like the time to point that out. Still, it means a lot that you're not mad anymore, Bubbles said, her voice more upbeat, and her eyes bright with relief. Jairu smirked, glancing over at Bubbles. Well, your scream was actually pretty impressive, she said, raising an eyebrow. It sounded like you've got some really good pipes. You do any singing? At the mention of her voice, Bubbles' expression lit up. She couldn't help herself as her excitement bubbled to the surface. Yay! She exclaimed, her face beaming. Without thinking, she threw her arms around Jairu in an enthusiastic hug. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she squealed, hugging her tightly, clearly overjoyed at the compliment. Jairu squirmed a bit, clearly caught off guard. Okay, it's fine, she said, her voice a little strained as she tried to wriggle out of Bubbles' enthusiastic grip. You don't need to hug me like that. Geez, I didn't say you could suffocate me with it. Bubbles pulled back, still grinning from ear to ear, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. Koda, who had been sitting quietly nearby, watched the scene unfold. He let out a tired but amused sigh, shaking his head. At least she forgave her, he muttered under his breath, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. On the other side of the room, Buttercup plopped herself down on a desk, cross-legged and leaning back, as she chatted with Tsu and Tokoyami about their own practical exam experiences. "Wow, pretty sweet you two got to fight clones and stuff," Buttercup said, a small grin tugging at her lips. "Must have been tough, though." Tsu nodded, her usual calm tone unruffled. "Yeah, it was difficult, rib-bit," she said thoughtfully, her finger tapping her chin. "I was sure that ectoplasm was going to get us for sure with his final move." "Agreed," Tokoyami nodded. "Our teacher was quite formidable in our battle, he knew how to handle the both of us very well. It was only after Azuri came up with a brilliant idea that we managed to pass the exam." His dark eyes flicked briefly to Tsu, who let out an indistinct "kero" of agreement, but of slight embarrassment. Buttercup, not one to let a golden opportunity slip by, had a good chuckle to herself. Shaking off that brief moment of vulnerability, "So, Buttercup," Tsu continued, shifting her gaze back to her friend, "judging from your demeanor, I take it you also managed to pass the exam as well. How did that go?" Her voice held the same curiosity as always, but there was an added warmth in her words, as though she knew Buttercup had something else on her mind. Buttercup tensed just for a second before brushing it off with a casual shrug. "It was a good battle, all things considered," she said with a nonchalant attitude. "Though I gotta say, Muscles was a little too into the whole villain persona there. He did give us a one hell of a challenge." Tsu blinked, her head tilting slightly to the side. "Really? You act like it was no problem at all." She paused, her expression thoughtful. "I would have guessed it would have been pretty difficult, seeing as he's the #1 hero and quite possibly the strongest." Buttercup rolled her eyes internally but kept her outward expression cool. "I mean, yeah, he's strong, but it's not like I haven't faced tough guys before." She casually commented, forgetting about her little secret. "It's just the usual deal. Hero stuff. Nothing special." Tokoyami raised an eyebrow at his classmate's strange sentence but decided let it slide. "Would it be reason to believe that you managed to work through that challenge quite easily, do working well with Midoriya?" he suggested, openly curious. Buttercup now rolled her eyes, the events of that day souring her mood, but did her best to quickly shrug it off. "I wouldn't call it teamwork if Midoriya and I weren't really seeing eye to eye," she said, her voice just a little more pointed than usual. "But, it's whatever, I managed to slip the HNDCFFS on him, while he was distracted." The memory of that little battle, both made her satisfied but a bit more suspicious. "Good thing too, otherwise we would have lost that match because of wasting time," she added, her words dripping with sarcasm that neither Tsu nor Tokoyami missed. Tsu's hums to herself, not missing the raven-haired girl's use of the boy's family name and not his first name as she had done countless times before. She wanted to ask, said nothing for a moment, realizing it was not her place. Something must have happened at the site of their exam. She glances over to see the boy in question. Izuku sat there, his gaze unconsciously drifting toward Buttercup, who was sitting off to the side with her back turned to him. He could feel the weight of the silence between them. "How can I make it up to her?" he thought, the guilt gnawing at him. "I never should have said those things, but what if she doesn't want to talk to me again?" His thoughts swirled, and before he even realized it, his eyes had locked onto Buttercup, watching her in silence. Her posture was rigid, and she didn't even glance his way. A part of him wanted to call out to her, to apologize again, but he didn't know where to start. "Deku, hey, Deku Deku. Wah." Izuku startled back to his senses, his heart skipping a beat as he yelped in surprise, eyes wide. Blinking rapidly, he focused on the person now standing in front of him, Uraraka, looking very confused and slightly miffed. "Oh, sorry, Uraraka, what happened?" he asked, still a little dazed from zoning out. Uraraka huffed, crossing her arms and pouting. "Deku, I was busy talking about my experience at the practical, you know. Seeing as we weren't given the chance to view the matches, let alone our own," she explained, her tone a bit more exasperated than usual. Izuku at least had the decency to look apologetic, which made Uraraka less pouty. "Sorry, Uraraka, I was just thinking about my match with Buttercup," he said, his voice trailing off at the mention of her name. The moment he said it, Uraraka's pout came back, full force. "We are not talking at the moment," Izuku continued, the sadness in his voice clear. "And I'm really sad about it. Maybe I should try a little harder and—" "Oh, don't do that." Uraraka cut him off, a little too quickly, before quickly composing herself. "I mean, you should let her be. I'm sure whatever her silly reasons for being mad at you are, she'll get over it. Maybe soon or hopefully later on." She muttered the last part under her breath. Izuku frowned, shaking his head. "I don't think her reasons are silly," he said quickly, his voice quiet but firm. "I was being really mean to her. I said some things that were uncalled for." He lowered his gaze, feeling the weight of his own guilt. "I didn't mean to hurt her, but I did." "Well, if you're feeling bad about it, that's a start, right?" Uraraka said, brushing off with a small wave of her hand and a smile. "But do give her some space for now. If she's upset, it might be better to let her cool off, and then maybe talk when she's ready." Izuku didn't respond right away. His thoughts were elsewhere, still lingering on Buttercup. He could see her standing just a few feet away, her back turned to him, the tension in her shoulders too obvious to ignore. His chest ached at the thought that he might have ruined their already complicated relationship. Before he could sink further into his thoughts, Uraraka perked up again, her usual energy returning. "Anyway, enough about Buttercup. I mean, we can't spend all day talking about her, right?" She nudged Izuku with her elbow, her tone shifting back to a lighter one. "There's still a ton of stuff we need to talk about. Like how I totally took down 13 with the moves, Gunhead showed me," she said, giving a demonstration of her moves. "Aoyama and I were holding on for dear life and trying not to mess up, but you should have seen it, Deku. It was awesome." Izuku gave her a small, distracted smile as she continued excitedly recounting her exam experience, again. But, again, his eyes kept drifting over to Buttercup, still standing apart from the group. "What if I've already messed things up too much?" At that moment, door to the class slid open and in walked Aizawa. "Alright, everyone get to your seats and dash." Aizawa was surprised to see his class quickly seated. He quickly shook it off with a gruff, "Alright," before continuing. "So obviously your final exams are over, and all of you passed the written portion, barely," he added, moving towards his desk. "However, the practical portion is what we staff determined what would be the deciding factor on what happened to you for the upcoming camp." Aizawa's finger clicked the remote, and the screen behind him flickered to life, displaying the final results of the practical exams. The students collectively groaned, some already anticipating what was to come. "Let's get this over with," Aizawa muttered under his breath, scanning the results on the board. His eyes latched onto Kaminari and Ishido first, and he couldn't help but sigh slightly. "Denki, Ishido," Aizawa began, his tone flat and unimpressed, "although you up against a seasoned pro hero like Midnight, you two were clearly too cocky at the start. That overconfidence was your downfall." He paused, letting the words settle before continuing. "However, at least Ms. Ishido was actually putting in some effort during the battle, even if it didn't lead to a victory." Mina, who had been sitting upright just moments ago, suddenly slumped over, her face buried in her arms. Her voice was muffled by the desk as she whimpered, "Aw man." Kaminari groaned, throwing his arms in the air. "Why, teach? Why does it feel like I'm always the first one to get knocked out?" He let his head flop onto the desk, completely defeated. Aizawa's gaze didn't soften, and he moved on without acknowledging the outburst. "You both failed. Take it as a lesson in humility and preparation. That said, you'll have a chance to make up for it." Next, his eyes shifted to Blossom and Bakugou. He exhaled slowly, a slight flicker of annoyance in his usually expressionless face. "Blossom, Bakugou, you two failed because you couldn't even manage to cooperate. You need to stop being so cocky, especially in the field. Blossom, sitting with her arms folded, just sighed in acceptance. She had nothing to say and rather just took in that at least her written portion made up for her less than ideal grade. There wasn't a flicker of emotion in her gaze, but the faintest shadow of a smirk pulled at the corner of her mouth. I see that my points were still a bit higher than Boom Boom Baby. She looked over her shoulder, to the display behind, a bit cool in demeanor. Bakugou, on the other hand, was practically vibrating with fury. His hands were clenched so tightly that smoke was pouring from his palms. What the hell do you mean I couldn't cooperate? That test was a joke. There wasn't even a fight. That DMN rat didn't even do anything, he bellowed, his quirk crackling with tension. Aizawa's gaze barely shifted, only now grew sterner. Be that as it may, Bakugou, you still failed in the end. And you failed to work together with your partner. He paused for a moment before adding, although, I can't say I fully agree with Nizu's methods, but maybe he was right to have me keep a closer eye on your attitude. Buttercup rolled her eyes. I guess keeping your eyes open for so long makes you blind to the obvious, huh, she muttered under her breath. Aizawa, who clearly didn't hear that, shifted his focus on to another pair. Ida, Ciro, he announced, getting their attention, your performance against Present Mike was lackluster, to put it mildly. Ida managed to pass him by the skin of his teeth, but honestly, it wasn't even close to what I expected. Ciro slouched even further in his seat, his hand draped dramatically over his forehead. Great, more work for me, he muttered under his breath, too tired to argue. Ida, on the other hand, was a picture of frustration and disappointment. His hands clenched at his sides, and his shoulders shook with barely contained shame. I should have done better, his voice was tight, betraying his inner turmoil. Aizawa interrupted him, clearly unamused. Ida, you weren't the worst, but your performance still left a lot to be desired. And that goes for you too, Ciro. You both need to get your heads in the game, Aizawa muttered, rolling his eyes. Mike says it was subpar. The mood in the classroom immediately took a nosedive. Kaminari, Mina, and Ciro all collapsed onto their desks, their chins hitting the wood with a dramatic thud. Bakugou's scowl deepened, but he didn't say anything. Blossom, though silent, didn't appear affected in the slightest. She merely glanced around the room, clearly indifferent to the reactions of her peers. Aizawa's next words hung heavily in the air. Seeing as how we clearly have some issues with certain individuals' work ethic, the results will determine whether you get to go on the summer camp trip. And I'm sorry to say, he let the words hang for a moment, drawing out the tension. Mina, Kaminari, and Ciro all visibly deflated, their faces pressed into their desks. Aizawa watched them for a moment before continuing, it has been decided you are all going to summer camp. The room went completely silent for a heartbeat, and then chaos erupted. What? The class shouted in unison, their voices a mixture of shock, confusion, and disbelief. Aizawa allowed the noise to wash over him for a moment before he raised his hand, silencing the class with a quick flick of his wrist. This summer training camp the school has set up for you is specifically designed to help improve your strength. Keeping any of you from going would be illogical if we want you to improve. However, he let his eyes scan the room, his lips twitching into something akin to a smirk. The class tests were also meant to see who could overcome challenges, and who needs further tutoring in combat knowledge. The teacher's usual expressionless face curled slightly, just enough to be considered a twisted smirk. Telling you that you wouldn't go after you failed. That would be a rational deception. Rational deception, the class screamed in unison, their voices a mix of indignation and confusion. Ida, now stood, was shaking with frustration. So we've been lied to twice now. First, you tell us we failed, then we find out that's a lie too. Are you really not worried about how this affects our faith in you? Ochako, sitting behind him, deadpanned, way to be a wet blanket, Ida. Aizawa's deadpan gaze shifted to Ida, and he shrugged slightly. Perhaps. But consider the facts, it wasn't entirely a lie. Failure is still failure. The 5 of you, he glanced at Kaminari, Ashido, Siro, Bakugou and Blossom. You'll be receiving special supplemental lessons. And to be honest, they'll be far worse than summer school. The groans from Kaminari, Mina, and Siro could be heard all the way across the room, while Bakugou just clenched his fists tighter, his rage barely contained. Bubbles, the ever-optimistic one, finally spoke up from the back of the room. So the camp's still happening for everyone? Even if we all didn't do as well as we could have? Yes, Kayama, Aizawa replied dryly. You're all going. But the lessons you'll receive, especially those 5, will be something you'll never forget. Now, let us proceed with the lesson of the day. With that, Aizawa changed the topic. The students were still a bit put off by the man's reasoning, but, seeing as nothing would come from being annoyed, they decided to focus on the positives. The rest of the morning was pretty simple, listening to Aizawa and his lecture on whatever they lacked and how to best deal with future confrontations. But when lunch rolled around, the girls decided to eat on the rooftops, giving them space from the crowd. I don't know what you may call it, but I call BS to Aizawa's so-called rational deception nonsense, Bubbles said matter-of-factly, leaning against the rooftop railing as she took another bite of her sandwich. Bubbles. Blossom groaned, her face contorting slightly in a mix of disbelief and concern. But before she could chastise Bubbles, Buttercup, who had just taken a bite of her lunch, let out a loud snort, nearly choking on her food. She quickly recovered, wiping the crumbs from her mouth and laughing. Ha ha. Wow, Bubbles, that was too good. Honestly, that guy's got some nerve calling that rational deception. Bubbles shrugged, unbothered by Blossom's reaction. What? I'm just saying the truth. He lied to our faces and called it rational deception. Like, how do you even justify that? Blossom opened her mouth to say something, but Buttercup cut her off before she could get too worked up. Chill out, Red, she teased, glancing at Blossom with an eyebrow raised. I get it, you're all about following the rules, but Aizawa might be a hero, but his methods of teaching SCK. Blossom stared at Buttercup for a beat before letting out a frustrated sigh. Yeah, fine, realizing she wasn't going to win this one. I mean, he's no Miss Keen, I can tell you that. Yeah. Bubbles and Buttercup chimed in together, feeling a short dose of nostalgia. The girls then settled into a short silence, each of them finishing their lunch. The tension from the earlier conversation had mostly melted away, but it didn't last long. After a moment, Blossom slammed her rice cakes down into her lap with an exasperated huff. I am such an idiot, she muttered under her breath, not expecting to hear her own words so harshly. The sudden confession caught Bubbles and Buttercup off guard. Both of them turned to her in surprise. What do you mean? Bubbles asked, her voice softer now, clearly concerned. Buttercup raised an eyebrow, giving Blossom the signature, explain, look. Blossom sighed, staring out at the horizon for a moment before she finally spoke, her voice low and heavy. I failed the practical exam. I couldn't believe it. And then I just lost my patience. I let loose with those DMN robots at the end, and it was like I just snapped. I don't know what came over me. Ah, man. I wish I got to fight the robots instead, Buttercup pouted. Buttercup, Bubbles said, signaling for her to focus. Buttercup rolled her eyes, before proceeding to talk some sense into her sister. Sheesh, Bloss, why were you busy fretting over that, anyway? So you didn't do well, so what? It's not like this actually counts. She paused, glancing at Bubbles with a mischievous glint in her eye. Not like we were fighting actual villains and monsters, huh? It does matter, Blossom shot her a sharp look, her frustration only growing. What if we have to rush out and fight some villains? What if I lose control in the heat of battle? I can't risk that, she slumped further into herself, not again. Buttercup frowned but just held a smirk. Look, Bookworm. I get it. Bubbles and I went a little overboard, too, but no one got hurt. Well, mostly, she trailed off, a reminder of hers and Bubbles' battles, but it's fine. We learned from it. We're still in it, you know. We've still got it. With that, she crumpled up her sandwich wrapper and tossed it into the trash. As it sailed through the air and landed neatly inside, she raised her hands in triumph, yelling, "Yeah." Blossom, however, wasn't convinced. She sighed heavily and placed her rice cakes carefully in her lap, staring down at them with a furrowed brow. She still looked frustrated, and that was Bubbles. She walked over to her, slipping an arm around her shoulders and leaning into her with a more serious tone. "Blossom," Bubbles began, her usual bubbly nature tempered with a bit more maturity, "yeah, we understand why you don't want to lose control." Saying that, the air became serious and Buttercup lost her smile. "We also don't want to lose control again, and that's why we got those special lessons, in order not to repeat ourselves again. That was in the past and we all need to remember but not get so worked up," she added with a small smile. "And you can't blame yourself. You were matched up with someone who, quite frankly, is a poopy head and a total JRK. Blossom let out a small, short laugh at the choice of words. "A poopy head, huh?" Bubbles nodded earnestly, a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. "Yup. A poopy head. But seriously, you've been a great leader to us. We're just used to fighting battles together. But you have to admit," then she had a teasing smile. "Blossom, you're out of your depth here, though." "What?" Blossom blinked, her eyebrows furrowing. "Out of my depth, what do you mean?" Bubbles just giggled a bit, leaning back just enough to make sure her point hit. "For your whole life, you've been handling monsters, villains, and Buttercup's temper tantrums. That was a cakewalk compared to Mr. Boom Boom Head. Oi, I don't throw tantrums, okay?" Buttercup shot Bubbles a dark glare. "Any more, at least?" Blossom's lips twitched, holding back a laugh, but the little speech, though at first to reassure her, became funny and was just too much. She couldn't help herself, and soon, the laughter bubbled up, escaping in full force. Even Bubbles, her usual bubbly self, couldn't contain her own fit of giggles, while Buttercup crossed her arms and glared in mock indignation. Buttercup, although muttered something angry, under her breath, though the corners of her mouth were tugging up into a reluctant smile. Blossom wiped away the laughter-induced tears from her eyes, still smiling but with a slightly lighter heart. Okay, fine, maybe I needed that laugh. But still, I don't want to lose control. I need to stay focused." "You will," Bubbles said softly, her tone full of warmth. "And even if you do lose it a little, we've got your back. All of us." Blossom looked over at her friends, her resolve solidifying a bit more. Maybe she wasn't alone in this after all. "Thanks, girls, I needed to hear that." She gave them both a small smile, feeling a little lighter despite everything weighing on her mind. Buttercup grinned back. "We got you, Red. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? A little explosion here, a few broken robots, there will be fine." Blossom rolled her eyes, but a smile still on. They did notice a certain crack in the door. After classes. Lunch PRD was over and the girls continued the rest of the classes, till the final bell rang and it was time to head home. "This is so amazing. I thought we were going to miss out of this trip." Mina cheered out as everyone began gathering their things to go home. "Yeah, I thought none of you were going to be joining us." Sue responded. "Aizawa-sensei is hard to read sometime. While it seems strange Sensei deceived us once again, he obviously had reasons for it." Tenya added, "It seems he did it to try and scare us to going all out in our tests." Rolling her eyes, "Or he was just lazy to come up with a proper way of inspiring us," Buttercup quipped. Blossom rolled her eyes at her sister's remark. "Either way, it's good we all get to together at least to the training camp. That could be very interesting." Indeed, Momo smiled as she pulled out the sheet they were handed earlier about the upcoming camp. It says this camp begins in 3 weeks during our summer break, and will run for a little more than a week. We are to depart early the first morning and ride out to the mountains for our camp. This packing list is huge. Bubbles looked over everything listed in the camp manual with Koda. So much to get. A week? Izuku asked as he approached them. I'm going to need a new suitcase. I don't have anything bigger than my backpack. I don't even have a bathing suit. There's a ton of stuff that I need to buy. Kaminari had already spotted 8 items that he didn't currently own that were listed on the camp manual. Oh, I know. Toru spoke up with a bubbly laugh. We're off tomorrow and tests are over, so, she clapped her invisible hands together. How about we all go shopping together, Class A? Everyone could practically feel the invisible girl's smile. Good idea. This'll be a first, come to think of it. Kaminari was all for a social activity with the class. Yo, Bakugou, you wanna come too? Kirishima called out, wanting to cheer up his friend. No way in hell. Bakugou stalked out of the room without even a look back. Bubbles looked over at Koda, her introverted friend. What about you, Koda? Want to go shopping with me again? She asked cautiously, remembering the last time. Koda seemed to mull over the idea but quickly nodded, sure, Bubbles. I would love to come, I will need some stuff too. Also liking the thought of hanging out with her. Great, Koda. Overjoyed for her shy friend to come with. Next day Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall. This place has more shops than anywhere else in the prefecture. It's got the coolest and trendiest stuff. Mina shouted, throwing her fist in the air with a huge grin. The Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall. Toru cheered, joining her friend in the excitement. The group had dressed casually for their shopping trip, and if it weren't for the fact that they were clearly a large group, they'd blend right in with the hundreds of teens shopping today. The girls' outfits were laid back, but stylish. Blossom wore a red spaghetti-strap summer dress with a white shirt underneath and white sneakers. Buttercup sported dark jeans, a green t-shirt, and black sneakers, while Bubbles rocked a black knee-length skirt paired with a yellow CRP top featuring butterfly embroidery, along with matching yellow sneakers. You with the 6 arms, and you with the engine claws. You'll find everything you need over here. A shop clerk called out to Shoji and Ida as the group passed by a store. The brightly lit sign above the shop read, for all quirks, shapes, and sizes. Stores don't just have to cater to different body types due to quirks, they also need designs for all ages, from teens to seniors. No wonder this place draws so many customers, Izuku muttered to himself, admiring the variety of shops that had sprouted to accommodate the huge range of quirks in the world. You're going to scare children. Cut it out, Tokoyami interrupted, snapping Izuku out of his thought spiral. Our camp manual recommends well-worn footwear. Ida zipped past, eager to remind everyone. Then, he stopped short, his eyes widening in realization. Wait, should we be focusing on utility instead? Chill out, Spaz, Buttercup sighed. Anyway, I better find a big enough duffel bag, she said, looking around. You two coming or not? She turned to her sisters. Nah, I'll check out another section, Blossom replied. Thanks, but no thanks, Buttercup, Bubbles added. Hey, if you don't mind, Jiru spoke up, stepping toward Buttercup, I'm actually looking for a duffel bag too. Mind if I tag along? Buttercup shrugged. She didn't mind, and she wasn't about to make a big deal out of it. Sure, why not? But before she could take off, a voice shouted from behind. I knew it. Those are the guys from Class 1A. One guy called to his friends, all 3 of them clearly high school students. Dude. The sports festival was so awesome, the second guy added, grinning from ear to ear. Whoa. People still remember that? Ochako blurted, flustered at the unexpected recognition. You girls are super cute. The third teen, clearly the most confident of the trio, called out, causing Momo and Jairu to blush slightly. They weren't used to receiving such blatant attention from guys. What? Ochako's cheeks darkened, and she quickly covered them with her hands, stepping closer to Izuku as if to hide. Yeah. Especially those badass sisters. You guys were so frickin' hot. The third guy shouted, causing the Powerpuff Girls to freeze, clearly taken aback by the compliment. Dude. The other two guys stared at him like he was out of his mind. Blossom was momentarily lost for words, her face turning warm, while Buttercup, ever the picture of indifference, still felt a faint blush creeping up her cheeks. It didn't go unnoticed by someone. Bubbles, the only one who managed to keep her cool, smiled confidently. Thanks. We only did our best, she said, giving a nod before subtly squeezing Koda's hand for comfort, just enough to feel secure, but not enough to hurt him. He. Toru giggled, not even thinking of her invisibility. The trio of teens moved on after that, leaving Class 1A to their shopping. Well, at least they didn't ask for autographs or anything crazy. Zero shrugged with a chuckle. Then the class began to split up and each were heading their own direction. As Jairu and Buttercup were walking away, Izuku could not help but stare a little and fight the urge to walk over and try to talk to Buttercup again. Come on, Deku. Uraraka called out, pulling the boy, literally, out of his trance, much to his reluctance. I want us to check out the bug sprays if we will have any chance against those pesky pests, she said, giggling at her words. Yeah, sure, he replied, albeit, unenthusiastically. Walking through the sunscreen aisle, Momo hummed to herself as she came across her favorite brand. Quickly stocking up on a few bottles, she looked down and frowned. She was still only on cosmetic supplies and hadn't even looked for anything like a sleeping bag. I don't think I have ever actually camped before. Momo blushed in embarrassment, only able to recall staying at luxurious resorts with her parents growing up. Having to find things like this was certainly new to her, and she realized she probably should have asked for a little help from her classmates what to grab. Hey, Momo. Momo turned around to the familiar voice and smiled. Oh, hey there, Blossom. Where were you looking for some sunscreen too? She nodded, yeah. And I can see that you must be having trouble picking a good one, she said without any teasing, as she looked over the selection on display. Why yeah, I must admit that I have not really done this before. My servants usually handle the shopping, she explained, feeling even more embarrassed of what her friend thinking she's spoiled. Let us see here. She scanned the rows of sunscreen bottles, her fingers gliding across the colorful labels before she pulled one out. It was a sleek, pastel pink bottle with soft gold lettering that read, Sunsafe Supreme SPF 50. The bottle had a smooth, ergonomic design with a cap that twisted open easily, and a picture of a sun with a halo around it, almost like a symbol of protection. This one, Blossom said, holding it out with an assuring smile. It's perfect for skin types like ours. It has SPF 50, which is really high protection, and it's formulated with a mix of hydrating aloe and antioxidants. It'll keep your skin safe and smooth all day long without feeling greasy, which I know can be a problem with some sunscreens. She tilted the bottle slightly in the light, showing off the shimmer of the label. It's also water resistant for up to 80 minutes, so even if you sweat or get splashed, it'll stay on. Momo blinked in surprise as she took the bottle from Blossom, her fingers grazing the cool plastic. She read the label and nodded thoughtfully, surprised at how practical this seemed. Definitely not what she would have picked out on her own, given her lack of experience. The sunscreen seemed to have a sophisticated air about it, perfect for someone who cared about their skin but also didn't want to mess around with constant reapplication. Momo's mind wandered for a second, realizing that she had been worried about coming off as spoiled, but Blossom was acting like it was no big deal. She didn't tease her, didn't judge her. In fact, she just seemed genuinely helpful. Momo blushed a little, then blinked again before finally speaking up, "Thank you, Blossom, this is a good brand. I can see you really know what you're talking about." She smiled warmly, hoping her compliment came across as sincere. Blossom giggled softly, well, I guess I had to learn the hard way when I was younger. She then reminisced, my sisters and I, we used to spend a lot of time outside, not really thinking about sunburn or how dangerous it could be. I remember one summer, we got so burned that we couldn't even sit down properly for a week, she said with a small laugh, despite the painful experience. After that, we all became a lot more careful about taking care of our skin. We learned to respect the sun and not act so cocky with the elements. Now, it's second nature. Momo's eyes widened, before she took a moment to nod in understanding. Well, you certainly know how to pick out good products, Momo said, adjusting the sunscreen in her hands. I'll be sure to take better care of my skin now too. Blossom grinned. I'm glad I could help. And hey, don't feel bad about not knowing all this stuff. We all have our strengths, right? She gave Momo a reassuring smile. Momo felt a bit better at her friend's words and continued browsing around. Uraraka tapped her foot impatiently as she stood in the swimsuit section, the fabric of the swimsuit surrounding her like a sea of colors and patterns. She'd told Izuku they should shop together, but he'd insisted, strongly so. The man felt flushed upon the thought of entering the store, on checking out a different store. She hadn't liked the idea. She wanted to spend time with him, even if it was just picking out silly clothes. But she'd agreed, with one condition, he had to answer his phone when she called. Come on, Deku, pick up, she muttered, her finger hovering over the screen as it rang for the second time. She could already picture him, lost in his own world, not realizing how much she just wanted to talk to him. She was starting to feel a little disappointed, wondering if maybe he was getting too wrapped up in her. The phone rang again, and then silence. She sighed, dropping her shoulders. Maybe he was busy. She shifted her weight, trying to distract herself by looking at a few more swimsuits, but the thought of him alone somewhere out there, without her, gnawed at her a little. Her thumb hovered over the dial again when something inside her clicked. Maybe I could turn this into an opportunity. She'd eyed a particularly cute, but daring swimsuit earlier, and the more she thought about it, the more she convinced herself that it was the perfect distraction for Izuku. If she could just get his attention, maybe he'd see her in a new light. Maybe he'd realize how cute she could look in something like that and how cute she was in general. I can't just let this slip by. I can show him that I'm fun, that I can be confident in something like this, she thought, picking up the phone once more and calling Izuku again. Her heartbeat raced a little in anticipation. She could already picture his face lighting up when he saw her in the swimsuit. The phone rang once more. The ringing in Izuku's pocket continued to go off as he sat down on the bench, his shaking hand not reaching for it. His eyes glanced down to his side as the vibration kept going until it stopped, feeling his heart ache not being able to answer it and call for help. Don't worry, you can always call them back later, Midoriya. Izuku's skin shivered once more from the cold voice next to him, his eyes shifting back to the figure sitting next to him. He had to turn slowly due to the bony hand wrapped around the back of his neck, only the middle finger not making contact with his skin. His gaze drifted up to the black hooded figure, covering the ragged gray hair of the man who came up onto him the moment he was alone, his red eyes and crooked smile beaming down to him with no severed hand covering his face. Shigaraki, he whispered, his voice barely above a breath, his throat closing up with fear. Now, don't be hasty, Tamura Shigaraki chuckled, the sound sickening in its cheerfulness. He tapped the tip of his finger lightly over Izuku's throat, making Izuku flinch, but he didn't dare move. I and an associate of mine, were just out for a little walk, checking out the city. It's such a nice place, you know. His eyes narrowed, amusement dancing in his gaze. And then we saw your little group walking around, minding your own business. I thought, well, what's the harm in having a chat? It's been a while, hasn't it, Midoriya? Izuku swallowed hard, the tension in his chest growing to the point where he could hardly breathe. His eyes flicked down to the hand that hovered dangerously close to his throat, the skin around his neck crawling as Shigaraki's finger traced a path toward his pulse. If the man wanted to kill him, he could do it in an instant. All it would take was One careless move. What do you want from me? Izuku forced out, his voice quivering. He clenched his fists in his lap, willing himself to stay still. If I move, if I show weakness, I'll never make it out of this alive. Shigaraki's smile only grew wider, his red eyes flicking to the side as if considering something. What I want? Oh, it's nothing too special, just a little conversation. Maybe you can help me out, Midoriya. Buy me some time. His voice dropped lower, tinged with something annoyed and dangerous. And, I suppose he will get to talk to those other BRTS, as well. Izuku didn't understand what he was talking about but, he instantly started worrying for the others and this mysterious associate. Please let it not be him. Meanwhile, on the other side of the mall, Bubbles, Koda, and Toru were enjoying their own shopping. They had split off from the rest of the group after their initial shopping spree and ended up wandering into a section of the mall filled with new stores showcasing all kinds of oddities, quirky gadgets, and fun items. Toru, with her ever-present curiosity, had led the trio into a small tech store that sold a mix of unique gadgets, from futuristic-looking headphones to mood rings that supposedly changed color based on your emotions. These are adorable, she giggled, holding up a set of glow-in-the-dark wristbands that pulsed with different colors. She slipped one onto her wrist, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Imagine wearing these for a night patrol. They'd make it so much easier for everyone to see each other in the dark. Koda, less enthralled by the flashing lights and techie items, instead, he was quietly browsing through a section dedicated to animal-themed products. He picked up a plush koala keychain, its little eyes and fuzzy ears causing a small smile to spread across his face. These are cute, he said softly, turning it over in his hands. Koalas are peaceful, I like them. Bubbles was far more fixated on the store's selection of trendy clothing. She had picked up a jacket with built-in LED lights that ran along the sleeves in a glowing, customizable pattern. Check this out. We could all wear something like this to patrol. Imagine the looks we'd get. She grinned, clearly more focused on the fashion statement than the practicality. But suddenly, as Bubbles looked around, her eyes caught a strange movement near the entrance. A figure stood outside a nearby store, smiling and waving at the passers-by. The man was tall, with a thin, almost too thin build. His features were plain, but there was something unnervingly off about him, like he was waiting for someone. Bubbles' gut instinct immediately told her something was wrong. She turned to Koda and Toru, her voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of concern. Hey, guys, I'm going to check out that store across the way. It looks interesting. Toru's eyes lit up. Ooh, can I come with you? She asked eagerly. Bubbles shook her head. It'll just be window shopping, and I wanted to just see what the guy had there. She did her best to convince them. You two go finish up your shopping, I will catch up shortly, and if it's anything worth checking out, I'll let you know. Toru seemed slightly deflated but quickly perked up. Alright, well, we'll meet you back here, yeah, and towards another display. Koda, however, wasn't convinced as he stood back. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Bubbles' expression. You sure you're okay? You look worried. Bubbles smiled reassuringly, but there was something in her eyes that made Koda pause. I'm fine, Koda. I just want to take a look at this place. It won't take long, I promise. Still unsure, Koda sighed but reluctantly agreed, giving her one last look. Alright, but please do hurry up, he warned. And be careful. Bubbles nodded, giving him a quick hug, Koda taking her bags before she skipped off toward the mysterious shop. As she approached the store, the man outside greeted her with an overly wide smile, his eyes glittering oddly under the bright mall lights. Ah, a customer, he said cheerily. Welcome, welcome. Please, come in and see what I have to offer. His voice was smooth, almost syrupy, but there was something strange about it, like it didn't quite match his average, too thin appearance. His claws long and unnaturally sharp clinked faintly as he gestured for her to come inside. Sure, she said with forced politeness, stepping inside. The shop was bare. There were no shelves or displays, only a few objects set up in the window, surrounded by an eerie quiet. It was almost as if the store wasn't fully open yet, or perhaps was just an act. "Do pardon me," the man said, his voice taking on a slight apologetic tone, "I'm still getting things set up. Just moved in, you see." But before he could continue, he was cut off by Bubbles' sharp words. "Drop the act, she said, her voice steely and filled with sudden realization. The man froze, his friendly demeanor slipping into something darker. Slowly, he turned to face her, his form blurring with a sudden dark red smoke that swirled around him. When the smoke cleared, he was no longer the scrawny, strange shopkeeper, but the creature who had tormented her and her sisters in the past. Bubbles said, her voice low, hands glowing with energy. "I knew it." Chuckled darkly, his sharp claws tapping together. Well. Looks like the little Powerpuff was able to see through my disguise. How unfortunate. His grin widened as he continued. "But, really, I prefer this form. Much more me, you know." His eyes twinkled with something sinister, a gleam of amusement in his expression as he took in Bubbles' defensive stance. "I'm not playing games, Bubbles clenched her fists, her energy sparking brighter. "Surrender now." Feigned a hurt expression. "Oh, Bubbles. You wound me, I thought you liked dress up." His voice lowered, taking on a mocking tone. "But I wouldn't be so quick to use your little powers on me, so soon, you know, using your quirks without permission is a big no-no, in this world my dear. Imagine what would happen if you used your powers in here and caused a ruckus. The mall would be in quite a state of disarray, wouldn't it? I can't imagine how you will explain this to the authorities." Bubbles' frustration and anger surged, but she knew he was right, and she hated that. If she attacked him here, there was no telling what damage would be done, and was known for disappearing when cornered. "I can see why Buttercup is so angry at this," she thought, as she lowered her hands, though her body remained tense, ready to react at a moment's notice. "Don't think this is over," Bubbles said, her voice tight. Him's grin widened, and he slowly took a step forward. "Oh, I'm counting on it. You and your sisters, you think you're safe here? That you're liked? Pfft. You should all be on your guard. There are forces in this city that are ripe for the playing, Bubbles. And trust me, you'll be the star of the show." Bubbles felt a cold chill crawl up her spine, her pulse quickening as him's cryptic words lingered in the air. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice trembling with both frustration and suspicion. Chuckled darkly, "Oh, believe whatever you want, my dear. But as for the rest of your little fan club," he paused, glancing toward the door as if lost in thought. "Let's just say there's an associate of mine here, and he was so eager to talk to them too. It's all part of the performance, you see." "Who's your associate?" Bubbles demanded, narrowing her eyes. "Is it someone I know?" Just shrugged nonchalantly. "Does it matter? You'll find out soon enough. But be careful, my little star, because soon this world will be in for a show unlike any other." Bubbles was about to fire off another question when suddenly grinned wider, his claws flicking in the air. "Now, this has been fun, but I must be off. The scene is about to change, and you won't want to miss it." Chuckling evilly to himself. Before Bubbles could react, snapped his claws, and another burst of dark fire enveloped him. The heat was intense, but before she could launch an attack, he was gone, leaving nothing but a faint smell of sulfur and the strange, unsettling feeling that she had just scratched the surface of something much darker. Bubbles stood frozen for a moment, her energy still glowing, her heart racing. She hadn't gotten any answers, but the warning was clear. Something was wrong. Something was coming. And it would take all of her and her sister's strength to face it. "I have to warn the girls." He turned and walked quickly out of the decoy shop, her mind racing. She needed to warn her sisters and fast. After bursting out of the store, Bubbles didn't slow her pace. Even as Koda's voice called after her, she couldn't afford to stop. She had to find her sisters. Flying wasn't an option right now, so she pushed herself harder, feet pounding against the pavement as she raced through the mall. It wasn't long before she spotted Buttercup, chatting casually with Jiru as she carried a few bags in her arms. Without hesitation, Bubbles called out to her sister. "Buttercup." Jiru, with her sharp hearing, turned instantly, her attention snapping to Bubbles. "I think your sister is calling you," she said, her voice tinged with concern. Buttercup's gaze immediately shifted, and she could tell from the way Bubbles was running toward them faster than usual and with a look on her face that wasn't quite panic, but close, that something was wrong. The fact that the usually upbeat Bubbles had that strange, familiar smell about her only added to the worry gnawing at her gut. Buttercup instinctively took a step forward, her eyes narrowing as Bubbles came to a halt in front of her. "Bubbles, what's up? What's going on?" Buttercup asked, trying to lighten the mood with her usual bravado. But the tension in her sister's posture made it clear something wasn't right. "You're acting like there's been a fire or something." Bubbles didn't answer right away, just shaking her head as if trying to shake off the weight of the moment. But then she nodded in confirmation, and that was all Buttercup needed. Her suspicion was right. "Him. Where is he?" Buttercup asked, her voice rising in volume and urgency. "What did he say?" Bubbles swallowed hard, the gravity of the situation settling in her chest. "I'll explain everything, but first we have to find Blossom." She turned quickly, ready to move again. Buttercup didn't waste a second. She tossed a quick glance at Jiru, who stood confused, still holding the shopping bags, clearly unsure of what was going on. But there was no time to explain. With a nod, Buttercup followed her sister, and they took off, leaving the two of them behind, bewildered and wondering what in the world was happening. It didn't take long for them to find Blossom. They didn't need to say much. Bubbles' urgency was enough to communicate the underlying message: him was back, and there was an associate involved, someone else who had a hand in whatever dark plot him was orchestrating. Blossom's face hardened at the news, the familiar weight of tension settling over her. "Oh no, this is bad. Quick, we have to dash." Any planning that she wanted to say fell on deaf ears when an alarm sounded. Blossom's face hardened as the realization hit. "This is bad," she muttered under her breath, the weight of the situation settling over her like a familiar, ominous cloud. "We need to." But her words were cut short by the sudden blaring of alarms echoing throughout the mall. In an instant, the mall erupted into chaos. Security rushed through the building, pushing people toward the exits, and within minutes, the first wave of police arrived. The girls were confused, thinking that they had somehow seen him, but it was not him they were looking for, but it was Shigaraki. And they soon realized that it was him's associate. The girls barely had time to catch their breath before the situation spiraled. Officers were flooding the mall, securing entrances and questioning witnesses. Panic set in as the police combed the area, but Shigaraki had vanished as quickly as he appeared. There was no sign of him, no trace of where he'd gone. The authorities were left scrambling, trying to piece together what had happened, but without any real understanding of what they were up against. Hours passed, the mall increasingly deserted, its once vibrant atmosphere now replaced with a tense, uneasy silence. The girls sat together, waiting for the situation to unfold, their minds racing. It wasn't just a random sighting. It was Shigaraki, a most dangerous criminal and one that seemed quite unhinged. The fact that he was connected to him only made the situation dire. Despite their longing to stay and help, the police insisted they leave, as well as the rest of their classmates. Their statements had been taken, their observations noted. It was time for them to go. The officers assured them that the situation was under control, or at least that they were doing everything they could to find Shigaraki before he caused any more harm. Buttercup's chest tightened. After finding out that it was Izuku that Shigaraki interrogated and almost Kishi wanted to argue, to demand that they stay and help, especially knowing that Izuku was caught up with that guy and held at a figurative gunpoint. But the officers were firm, and they couldn't risk leaving the scene too thinly staffed. With a heavy heart, Buttercup forced herself to leave, even as guilt gnawed at her. Outside, Midnight was waiting for them, her face drawn with concern as she quickly ushered them into her car. "You're safe now, but we need to get you out of here. We will talk about, when we get home." The girls fell into an uneasy silence as the car pulled away, the weight of the day's events pressing on them. The looming uncertainty about what was coming next hung heavy in the air. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 12. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author ChiWriters on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.